Okay, let's take a look at passage 2. As usual, I would like you to read it over and decide whether or not it contains an argument. So pause the video, think about that, and start again when you're ready. Okay, what did you decide? I think this passage does contain an argument. So now we can ask, what is the main conclusion? Again, look it over and see if you can find the ultimate conclusion there. Or if it's not there, see if you can figure out what it would be if we have to supply it. Again, pause the video, think about that, and come back when you're ready. Okay, what did you decide? I think that this ultimate conclusion is actually stated. So it's not like number 1. It looks to me like the ultimate conclusion is right here. Philosophy, in fact, that it refers to philosophy, so I'm going to just make that clear by adding it here. Philosophy helps society a great deal. That is what this passage is trying to get us to believe. So now, let's go back to the top and see which other claims are important. What about some people think that philosophy isn't useful to society? Do you think that that's an important claim in the argument? In other words, is it giving us reason to believe the ultimate conclusion? Think about that for a minute. Pause the video, come back when you're ready. Okay, I don't think that that's important. That is sort of a foil statement. It is setting up the reason for the argument to begin with. Some people don't think that this is important, which is why I am arguing that, in fact, it is important, but that's not part of the argument. So we can just ignore that. After all, well, that's an inference indicator expression. It's good to note that, but because this after all is basically tied to the ultimate conclusion, we don't want to think about that too much, because remember, it could say that the thing that follows it immediately is going to be given as a reason to believe the ultimate conclusion, or it could mean that the reasoning, which is composed of everything, is a reason to believe the ultimate conclusion. So it's good to note that that inference indicator is there, but let's not pay too much attention to it. What about if a discipline makes people more thoughtful, then it makes them better citizens? Is that important? And if it is important, can we divide it into 2 separate claims? Think about that for a bit. Pause the video, come back when you're ready. Okay, it is important, and we cannot divide it into 2 separate claims, right? I know it's important because the after all is saying, hey, this is a reason to believe something. And I can't divide it into 2 separate claims because if-then statements don't assert their parts. When I say if a discipline makes people more thoughtful, then it makes them better citizens. I'm not saying that a specific discipline does make people more thoughtful. And I'm not saying that it does make them better citizens. I'm just saying if the first thing, then the second thing. So they have to stay together. Okay, let's continue. What about this? If a discipline makes people better citizens, then it helps society. Is that going to be an important claim in the argument? And again, can we divide that into its parts? Pause the video, think for a bit, and come back when you're ready. Okay, it is important, and again, we cannot divide it into its parts for the same reason. It's an if-then statements don't assert their parts. So now we have claim 2 and claim 3. Now remember, the whole goal here is to not have more than 2 things in our head at a time. There's going to be a couple of exceptions to that we'll be seeing, but generally speaking, no more than 2 things at a time, because we're binary creatures. We put things together 2 at a time, usually with a couple of exceptions that we'll be seeing later. So we want to resist the temptation to continue to read here. I know it is the most natural thing in the world to go on and see what else is important. No. Let's pause. Let's understand how 2 and 3 are related to each other first. So take a look at claim 2 and claim 3 and ask, how do you suppose they are related to each other? Does it look like one is being given as a reason to believe the other inferentially? Or does it look like they are dependent reasons collaborating with each other to establish something else? Or are they completely independent? So pause the video, think for a bit, and come back when you're ready. Okay, looks to me like they are added. right? I don't think that 2 is a reason to believe 3. To see that, suppose someone didn't believe 3. We couldn't convince them of it by saying 2, I don't think. I don't think that the other supports the other 2. I don't think that 3 supports 2. I don't think that 2 supports 3. But they sure as heck have something in common. So it looks like they will snap together nicely. So let us write that. It's going to be 2 plus 3. Now remember, the new skill here is before we do anything else, as soon as we see the 2 claims are added together, we want to ask ourselves, what follows from them? So what follows from 2 and 3 when you add them together? Think about that for a moment, pause the video, and come back when you're ready. Okay, it is easy to want to say nothing. Nothing follows from 2 and 3 taken together. It's easy to think that because sometimes I think there's a tendency to think that if-then sentences don't really assert anything. They're not making any claim at all. So if I put 2 sentences, neither of which assert something together, how on earth can they possibly give us anything else that asserts something? But in fact, something does follow from 2 and 3. Let's think about what they have in common. If a discipline makes people more thoughtful, then it makes them better citizens. If a discipline makes people better citizens, so you see, what they have in common is a discipline making people better citizens. And then what we want to do is put together the uncommon parts. So a discipline makes people more thoughtful and helps society. How do you suppose they might go together? Well, let's think. If a discipline makes people more thoughtful, then it makes them better citizens. If a discipline makes people better citizens, then it helps society. So what ultimately follows from a discipline making people more thoughtful? Ultimately, it follows that that discipline helps society, correct? So that is what follows. I'm going to write it down here. From 2 and 3, it could be red, I just don't want it to be. From 2 and 3, we are going to get if a discipline makes people more thoughtful, then it helps society. Now notice I didn't give that a letter because for all I know, that is the next thing that the author is going to state. That might be idea 4, in which case, hurrah, I know exactly where idea 4 goes, right? It goes underneath 2 and 3. Let's think about how we figured this out, though. Take a look. 2 is an if-then sentence, and so is 3. This is going to give us a new inference form, which is called hypothetical syllogism. It is if P, then Q, and the next claim is also going to be an if-then statement. See if you can figure out what that next claim is going to be. So if 2 is if P, then Q, what would the if-then statement that corresponds to 3 be? Pause for a bit, think about it, and come back when you're ready. Okay, what will the if part be, the front part? Well, if 2 is, if a discipline makes people more thoughtful, then it makes them better citizens. The back part, the Q part, is it makes them better citizens. That is the front part of 3, right? So the back part of the first if-then is the front part of the other one. So it's going to be Q. And the back part of the second if-then is just some other statement. I'm going to use R. Note, I'm using P's and Q's here. I'm not using F and B for front and back because there are 2 if-thens, and so there are 2 fronts and 2 backs, and that would be confusing. I just want to show that we have 2 if-thens, And the back part of one, Q, is the same as the front part of the other. Now, what would follow from those? Can you think about what would follow from that? Think about that for a bit. Pause the video. When you've decided, start up again. Okay. I'm being told if I have P, then I have Q. And I'm being told if I have Q, then I have R. Now, do I know for sure that I'm going to get R? No. But what if I have P? What would follow if I know I have P? Well, if I have P, then I'm going to get Q, and if I have Q, then I'm going to get R. So like dominoes, if I have P, then I'm going to end up with R. If P, then R. That is a valid inference form, and so now it is a new one in our list. And by the way, if you go to the very back of this handout, you will see a list of all of the valid inference forms we are going to get and a reminder of the two invalid ones. So this is the next one, hypothetical syllogism. We call it syllogism because that's just a fancy name for a valid inference form, and we call it hypothetical because if-then statements are hypotheticals. So this is just a way of reasoning validly with if-then statements. That's all that is. So do you see how going from 2 and 3 to this subconclusion is, in fact, a hypothetical syllogism? So that's a valid inference. Now, we still haven't decided if this statement is going to be stated or not, so let's continue to read. And clearly, philosophy makes people more thoughtful. Okay, it wasn't stated. If the author is going to state the subconclusion that follows from 2 and 3, probably should do it right after saying 2 and 3, but she doesn't. Which means then that this subconclusion from 2 and 3 is in fact a missing subconclusion. So I'm going to give it a letter. And I'm going to put that letter right there. A down here. Good, that's an A. So now what we need to ask is, how is 4 related to this 2 plus 3 to A bit? Is it related to it with an arrow, with a plus, or with 2 separate arrows? Think about that for a moment, pause the video, and come back when you're ready. Okay, I'm thinking added. Philosophy makes people more thoughtful. That looks like it's going to go together really well with A, right? So I'm going to put it there. For A plus 4. And now I want this to just be super automatic. As soon as you figure out that you're adding 2 claims together, before you do anything else, ask yourself what follows from those 2 things. So think about that for a bit. From A and 4, what follows? Pause the video, think, and come back when you're ready. Okay, well, let's think. If a discipline makes people more thoughtful, then it helps society, says A. Philosophy makes people more thoughtful, says B. What follows? Well, philosophy helps society, right? Have we seen that before? Oh, yes, that's the ultimate conclusion. So I know that the ultimate conclusion is going to go right there. And there we have it. So here we added a missing subconclusion. And do you see how that just happens naturally if we follow that process that we talked about before? The process of, as soon as we see that 2 claims are being added, ask what follows and supply that. Either it will be something that is stated later, in which case we just add it like a normal subconclusion with a number, or it's not stated later, in which case we give it a letter and we add it. Okay? Now, you might have a question about this. You might think, well, isn't there another way that we could add missing subconclusions? And there is. Here, we added a missing subconclusion A by adding together 2 and 3. Can you think of another way to add these premises to get a different subconclusion? Think about that for a minute, Pause the video, come back when you're ready. Okay, a lot of people naturally want to add together, not necessarily, sorry about that, not 2 and 3, but 3 and 4. Would that work? I'm going to have this be a different color. See if I can make this go. 3 plus 4, would something follow from those? I'll call this B. If a discipline makes people better citizens, then it helps society. Philosophy makes people more thoughtful. That doesn't go well together, does it? Are there any others that go well together? By the way, let's just pause here. Do you see why that doesn't go well together? There's nothing in common there between 3 and 4. So I'll put nope. What other combination might work? 2 and 4, right? So let's do that. That has something in common. 2 plus, and by the way, if you're thinking, why on earth are you making this more complicated? Couldn't I just stay with A and 2 plus 3? Absolutely, obviously you could. But sometimes people say, there's another way to do this, right? And I want to make the point that yes, there is another way to do it, this thing. But it doesn't mean that every way to do it works. Like you can't add 3 and 4. They don't have anything in common. But 2 and 4 do, just like 2 and 3 do. If we add together 2 and 4, what do we get? Think about that. If a discipline makes people more thoughtful, then it makes them better citizens. Philosophy makes people more thoughtful. Philosophy makes people better citizens, right? Citizens is a word that I always misspell. This looks wrong to me. Good, philosophy makes people better citizens. So if we were to map that, what would it be? I tell you what, why don't you tell me? Think for a bit, map the argument with 2 and 4 added together for the sub-conclusion. Write that down, see what you get, pause the video, come back when you're ready. Okay, let's see. I want to go to draw. And just for fun, since I'm learning how to do this, I will change this so it's also green. If we go to 2 plus 4, because what we're doing now is we're adding those together, right? We're adding 2 plus 4 together to get a missing sub-conclusion C. And then what do you suppose C would do? Well, C would be added to 3, right? And where would that go? That would go down to 1. Just like that. Note that both of these diagrams, or both of these maps, have a lot in common. In all of them, 2, 3, and 4 are premises. 2, 3, and 4 are premises. It's just a matter of which of these 2 premises did we put together first to generate a missing sub-conclusion. There will always be more than one way to do that, but it does not follow that every way to do that works. 3 and 4, for instance, doesn't work. Now, which is better? I suppose it depends upon what you mean by better here. I strongly prefer the first one. That's because it more naturally represents and flows from the process that we talked about earlier. This process of take them as you get them. Take these ideas or these claims as you encounter them. Don't like look over 3 to see that 2 and 4 work together. That imposes an unnecessary cognitive burden on yourself. Generally speaking, as soon as you can put claims together, put them together. Take them as you get them. Very good. So, catch ya in passage 3.